Kyle Busch gets his fifth win in Fontana, California, this time with Richard Childress Racing, and many other drivers show speed early on in the 2023 season. Let's talk about NASCAR in Southern California. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR in Southern California. Kyle Busch gets his fifth win at the Fontana racetrack and his 61st career win, but his first win with Richard Childress Racing. Many other drivers throughout the field show a ton of speed, while some drivers have really bad days early on in the race. We'll talk about all that. I want to start out by saying that I have lost my voice. That was not all from screaming at the TV when Kyle Busch got the win today. Although that probably did not help, but I did lose my voice over the weekend, so I do apologize for that. I hope you guys can put that off to the side and enjoy the video regardless. But we have a lot to talk about. We have a ton of great storylines to get into. We had a great race today in California, a great flow of the race, which Daytona had a great flow last week as well, and that moved over to today in California. So two great races to start out the season. This race had it all, really. Had strategy playing out at the end. One big wreck on a restart. I'll obviously talk about that. A few drivers, a couple of the favorites that had issues early on, hit to Kyle Larson. I'll obviously talk about that as well. But one of the more polarizing drivers, or one of the more popular or well-known drivers in NASCAR, is probably the best way to put it. Kyle Busch gets his 61st career win today, and we'll obviously talk about that. So let's start out with the big story, which is definitely my driver, Kyle Busch. I'm so excited to see him get this win. This is a huge win because we all know that Kyle Busch has nothing to prove. 2 championships, 60 wins before today. The stats have been incredible. Over 200 wins through the top 3 national series. But Kyle Busch even said himself that he thought he had something to prove, and he wanted to do good with another organization outside of Joe Gibbs. He went over to RCR. Everything has clicked. He got his first win today. But let's not just talk about the win today. Let's talk about this whole start of the season. We had the Clash a few weeks ago, which is a non-points exhibition race. He was really fast. Him and Dillon were really fast at that race. We go to the Daytona 500, or you can even go back to the dual races on Thursday if you want to, when he was leading that late and then got spun by Suarez. The Daytona 500, the first week of the NASCAR season points-wise, the first points race, and then has the lead late. Unfortunately, things don't work out in an overtime situation, but today was fast all day, had the speed, and showed, and he got the win today in incredible fashion. A great job, a great last pit stop. The pit crew was on fire today. The pit crew was extremely fast throughout the entire day. Kyle Busch's pit crew was. That was one of the concerns leaving Joe Gibbs, was would RCR be able to provide a pit crew as fast and as good as Joe Gibbs was able to provide Kyle Busch for so many years. And that obviously is true after watching last week, after watching today. They have been really fast, so it should be exciting to see. I think every driver in the field right now, every other driver is thinking, oh me, because if this means Kyle Busch is back, this could be big trouble. This could mean big problems for everybody outside. Not only that, Austin Dillon is showing a ton of speed as well with the help of Kyle Busch. So we're going to have to watch him as well this season. I want to talk about the stats from Kyle Busch just for a little bit, because there are so many to go through. This is his 5th win in Fontana and what will be his final win in Fontana, as the racetrack is going to get essentially bulldozed after the sun sets tonight on the Xfinity Series race, as NASCAR has sold all of the acreage, all of the acres and all of the land around the racetrack. So this is most likely going to be, probably guaranteed, this will be the last race at the 2-mile configuration. There are some speculations we won't even go back to the Fontana area, but we'll have to see how that goes. That's obviously a long ways out. We already know we won't be racing in the Fontana, California area in 2024. So we have to continue to keep an eye on that. But Kyle Busch has won at this racetrack in 2005. That was his first ever win in NASCAR. His first ever NASCAR Cup Series win came in 2005 at this racetrack. He won in 2013 and 2014, back-to-back years, and then he won in 2019. And now when he won in 2019, that was his 200th career win among all 3 series in 2019 in the Cup Series. He got that win at Auto Club, or in Fontana, and then of course gets his first win for Richard Childress Racing today in 2023. So that means that he's won at this racetrack at Fontana for Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Richard Childress Racing and that is extremely impressive over the span of close to 20 years. So definitely a very memorable racetrack for him. A lot of memories made at Fontana. But there's a couple other big stats to talk about for Kyle Busch. Obviously, this is his 61st win throughout his career in the NASCAR Cup Series, but this breaks a record that has been held for a long time. 19 consecutive seasons with a win. Kyle Busch has won at least one race, in many seasons more than one, but Kyle Busch has won at least one race every year since 2005. That takes the record away from Richard Petty. It was 18 years. With Kyle's win today, that makes it 19 years, and he breaks Richard Petty's all-time records for consecutive seasons with at least one NASCAR win, which is extremely impressive, and we might never see that get broke again, at least any time in our lifetimes, because that is really difficult to do. One win without you just have one bad season, like Kyle Busch had last year, but was able to get a win. You have one bad season, one off year, like so many drivers have had. Kevin Harvick, Kurt Busch has had a few. All your great drivers have had a couple off years. Even Joey Logano recently, and they have that one off year and don't get a win. I don't know if we'll ever see somebody go 19 consecutive years and counting with at least one NASCAR win. I want to go through the top 10 real quick because everybody in the top 10 was fairly consistent throughout the entire day. Kyle Busch was really fast, especially at the end on the last pit stop, was able to make some adjustments. He obviously got the win. Chase Elliott was really fast. He was probably outside the top 5 race car. At least he was not in the top 5 for a majority of the race. Until the very end, he found some long run speed, was able to come up through the field, finish second, was running close lap times to Kyle Busch, but there was really no chance, especially with the amount of laps left, that he would catch the number 8 car. So Chase Elliott gets a solid second place finish, which is a great rebound from the last couple of weeks. If you remember, just looking at the Clash, which I know is not a points race, he was really slow, had a terrible week last week in Daytona, getting wrecked out early, so to get a second place finish definitely helps turn that season around for the number 9 team of Chase Elliott. Ross Chastain was really fast today. Both the Trackhouse teams, obviously you see Daniel Suarez right behind him in 4th. Both of those guys showed really, really strong race car speed. They were really good all day long, especially Ross Chastain. Chastain led a majority of the laps. It looked like he had this race won. He essentially dominated at least 3/4 of this race. Chastain was the guy to beat until Kyle Busch just showed up at the end. But a lot of speed being shown already early in the season for this Trackhouse team. And one thing that's very important, especially for Daniel Suarez, I must say especially, is getting it done. Obviously Suarez was fast a lot last year, but wasn't able to get to the finish. He was able to get to the finish today and last week as well, with I believe he finished 7th last week. So really good start to the year for this Trackhouse team, especially Daniel Suarez in 4th. Kevin Harvick, his last race in Fontana, well, everybody's last race at this racetrack, but in his final season, Kevin Harvick finishes 5th at his somewhat hometown. I guess you could call this his hometown racetrack in California. I believe he's from Southern California as well, where he grew up. So final race for him here. Had a pretty decent day. Run up front for most of the day. Had the lead for a little bit, but I don't think anybody was quite as fast as Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. Those are really the guys to beat all day. But right behind them, you had Kevin Harvick, Suarez, and Hamlin. A couple of those guys breathing down their necks. Like I said, you had Denny Hamlin in 6th. Brad Keselowski, what a comeback. Had problems early on in the race. Actually was involved in that big wreck. Spun by himself and then was involved in a wreck later on, and a big wreck later on. Hit the wall at the end of the race, but was still able to finish with a solid 7th place finish. So showing a lot of speed early on for Brad Keselowski. He was fast last week at Daytona. Watch this team this year. I want to watch them. I don't know if they're going to be championship contenders. I don't see that. I don't even know if they're going to get a race win, but I think it's very possible that they could, and I think they're going to be a lot better than they were a year ago, because a year ago, man, RFK was just off. That first year with that organization was absolutely terrible. Brad Keselowski was having one of his, if not his worst season ever. Watch him this season. I think he's going to do a lot better and could potentially contend for more top 10s and wins and such. Alex Bowman was pretty fast all day. He was up front early on in the race, started out up front, fell back a little bit, got a solid 8th place finish. Austin Dillon was able to rebound. He was having a terrible day, was able to rebound, come up and finish 9th. Like I said, RCR back up in the trying to get these race wins, trying to run better. So a solid 9th place finish for Austin Dillon. I'm sure he wanted a little bit more out of it. But you can take what you can get. So a 9th place day for Austin Dillon, take the top 10. Joey Logano was probably the 3rd fastest car for majority of the race. I don't know if he came down pit road too early or what happened there at the end of the race, but not a great pit stop. when he came down pit road early in the race. I think he was third when that pit stop happened. He came back out in like 8th or 9th. So really poorly. I don't want to say poorly executed, but that just didn't go well at all for Joey Logano. What he was trying to do just didn't work out. I don't know if it was the pit crew that was slow or him getting on pit road. It could have been any little thing. Could have been a whole bunch of things is the reason why he lost a ton of spots there. He ended up finishing 10th for Joey Logano. I do want to mention a couple other drivers that had decent days. That was Martin Truex Jr., who lost a wheel. Truex Jr.'s wheel fell off at the point of the race. That'll be the first penalty with the new rules. I made a video on these new rules a few weeks ago where you will get a 2-lap penalty. You will be held for 2 laps if you lose a wheel on pit road. So Truex Jr. went 2 laps down, was able to work around with the cautions, get back on the lead lap, get a solid 11th place finish. That's not bad at all for Martin Truex Jr. to be able to finish 11th after going 2 laps down from a penalty. Definitely a great rebound. Kyle Larson, another guy that I want to talk about. He had a really rough day to start out the day. Just a terrible day for Kyle Larson. He starts the race. It's before the competition caution. I think it's lap 10 or 11. You got to remember, no practice, no qualifying. This was the first time these cars were on track, and Kyle Larson had an electrical issue. One of your top teams, Cliff Daniels, was upset. I'm sure Kyle Larson was upset because they knew that they had a really fast car, and they were potentially the favorites to win this race today going into it, as they were last year's winners at this racetrack. And Kyle Larson's just really good at these 2-mile ovals. But it's unfortunate for him. Had an electrical issue early on, but did stay out, did fix the problem. I think they went 17 laps down, got a couple laps back, actually, and learn things about the race car. That was the whole point. They wanted to go out there and learn things about the race car, race around a little bit, get some pit stops in, which is really smart. And that right there is why Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson is such a dangerous duo. I think you want to look at that right there and say they're going to get some wins this year, because that mentality is fantastic to say, hey, we're out of the race for the win. But we're going to go up here anyway, and we're going to learn some things. And they actually, with the wrecks we had and the problems other drivers had, they finished 29th. So those could be potentially valuable points when you come down to the end of the season. We see at the end of the year how 1 or 2 points can be big, much less, 10 points. So definitely exciting to see what they can do there going into Las Vegas next week. Hopefully they have a better start to their season. So we did have a big wreck. I believe that was on lap 87. It was right before the halfway point. You see, took out a lot of good cars. This was the wreck Keselowski was actually involved in. I don't know what happened. I don't know if this was with the leaders. Joey Logano at the time just didn't get fired off quick enough, just didn't go quick enough like everybody else thought he was, and it just kind of got bottled up. And you see the big wreck there. Eric Almirola taking out a pretty decent car. The 20 car of Christopher Bell obviously had a great week last week, trying to have a good week this week. Has been fast lately, got involved in the wreck, taking him out. And Tyler Reddick going over to his new team, 2311, was taken out in that wreck as well. And then Austin Cindric obviously was in that wreck. So we had a big wreck there right before the halfway point of the race that took out a lot of drivers. So this does mark the last race in Fontana, California. Unfortunately, I know a lot of fans wanted to keep it, but that is it. When the Xfinity race finishes tonight, that will be it for NASCAR at the 2-mile configuration. I encourage you to go watch the Xfinity race, by the way. That's on as I'm doing this video, so in the background. But that's it. That's really all there is to talk about. And, of course, let's get rowdy.